What is up, guys? Play Commander here, and welcome to a very different type of video. Today, I am joined by, go ahead and introduce yourself, guest.
Hi, I am Temporal. You may know me from the chat in the Fire Red Let's Play.
Yeah, and in my server
and
if you're
the
there.
guy who comment timestamps on all his videos.
Yeah. Speaking of which, if you haven't already joined my server, go ahead and do it. Link's in the description. But, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different from what I normally do around here. We're going to be making a tier list of a series that I've been looking for an excuse to talk about on my channel for a very long time, and that is Danganronpa. I really like this series, and I also really don't. We'll get to that in a bit, but, yeah.
It's a lot of fun to talk about because it does so many things right and also so many things horribly wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many things that it does ridiculously well, and then for every one of those things, there's another thing that makes me want to die. And yeah, it's a fun series though. I'm not gonna deny that. So
that's
what we're gonna
That's why were you?
No, go ahead.
Okay, that's why I like talking about it more than Ace Attorney, which you still need to play.
Even though eventually.
Even though Ace Attorney is a series that I like a lot more, I like talking about Danganronpa more because there's rarely ever is it just okay.
Yeah, it's always one of the two extremes. And we'll be seeing both sides of those extremes in this video because we're going to be ranking each of the chapters. Now, just to clarify here, are we talking about just the trials or the chapters as a whole? Because I'm thinking about the chapters as a whole.
Alright, here's what I was thinking as sort of a compromise. I was thinking all the sequence of events that happen after where the motive is presented.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, when we talk about say,
like the build-up to the kill, the body discovery, investigation, and then the trial.
Yes.
Okay. So just to clarify here, these ones down here, that is the first game, the one with the little red banner. The little pixel art letter ones, that's Danganronpa 2, and then the ones that don't look anything like either of those are V3. So let's go ahead and get this. Let's just go ahead and get this out of the way right now. V36 bad.
Terrible.
Bad. Oh my god. Do I have a lot to say about this one? Holy crap.
You can go first. Go first.
I used to wholeheartedly believe that if a game is very enjoyable throughout, like, the beginning to end, it can't be ruined by a bad ending if the overall experience was enjoyable. Danganronpa V3 proved me oh so wrong, and oh my god, I wish it didn't. Because this is the single worst chapter, the single worst ending, and the single worst piece of media writing I have ever seen in anything ever. Something you have to keep in mind about me is that I went to university and graduated with a degree in film and media studies, so I literally dedicated my field of study and like 90% of my personal life into analyzing this kind of thing. V36 is the most poorly written thing I have ever consumed, like in any form of media, be it a TV show, an anime, a movie, a game, anything. It is the most poorly written excuse for writing I have ever encountered. And the reason for this is that, like I said when I kind of started this rant, not only does it kind of ruin the game, it kind of ruins the entire franchise.
You can go in depth. I'm sure no one's gonna click on this expecting to not be spoiled.
massive spoilers, by the way. If you haven't played these games, get the hell out of this video. This is not for you. But yeah, basically it's the cliche of none of this is real. It's such a cliche that it's a joke. Like the all of this is a dream thing is like the most infamous bad plot device you could possibly come up with. Not only does V3 pull that, but it pulls that on the entirety of the series. And if you consider V3 canon, it brings the entire franchise down. The entire franchise is significantly better if you don't count V3, and it's specifically because of this chapter.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead and explain your experience with V3. I still have more to say, but like, I'm gonna give you a little bit of mic time here.
I went into V36 expecting it to be terrible. It was still the most disappointed I've ever been. Ever.
We should probably clarify that the reason he went into it expecting it to be terrible is because me and a friend of mine, Arrow, have been basically telling him throughout his playthrough of the game. He was like kind of just like saying crap about it on my Discord and stuff, and we were talking about it together and stuff. And me and Arrow throughout his entire playthrough were telling you like, yeah, you're enjoying this. Just wait for it. You'll see. And so he kind of went into it with that anticipation of like, all right, surely it can't be that bad, right?
Alright, I was expecting it to be terrible. I go into, like, the investigation part, and I'm like, this is not fun. But I don't think it's worth being called the worst thing in any piece of media. Then I get to the trial, and there's the stuff about and there's the stuff about Rantaro and how he actually died. And that was fun. I liked that part. And then Junko
let me interject something right there, because that is something that I will actually give to V36's favor. It made Rantaro a much more interesting character.
Yes.
I will give it credit for that.
And then Junko shows up, and she says, there was one line she said that I felt actual fear when she said it. She said something about, sorry to all you Samugi fans, if there are any of you.
Oof. I don't remember that line, but I do
like,
now that you mention it, and yeah, that's a big oof.
I heard that, and I just thought, no. This can't be where they're going. This cannot be where they're going.
Oh, okay. We need to explain the backstory of that, because like 2 chapters earlier, when we were discussing this, when he was in chapter 3, I think, he brought up in the chat, like, I swear to God, they haven't done anything with Samugi thus far. She's not been relevant to any of these cases except the first one, and even that was very minor. I swear to God, if they pull she's actually the mastermind at the end, I'm gonna be so pissed. And I was trying so hard not to say anything.
Okay. So, I get to that part, and then the build-up, and then when they start building up to the reveal, I'm just like, just say it. If this is what you're doing, just say it. And then it goes on for an hour of them hinting at it slightly and not saying it. And then they finally say it. They say, everything that you're doing, it was just in a world of fiction. And this already sounds like the worst thing ever put into a video game, but somehow, when they put it into practice, it's worse.
Yeah, it really is. And look, that's like, if you want to go with a cliche of like all of this is fake, there are examples of that work. And you need to understand that cliche inherently isn't awful. It's not good, and 99% of the time it's not done well, but it can be done well. In fact, I would argue that one of the first, like, big, massive hits of the film industry, not like the first, but like one of the biggest, did it well. The Wizard of Oz. That movie did it well. That was a whole, like, oh, all of this was a dream, but they were kind of hinting at it throughout the entire film, and, like, the payoff of that reveal not only makes sense, but it kind of puts into perspective, like, the development of the character, and from that extent, it's done well. V36 actually does the exact opposite of that, because there is character development throughout the majority of V3 up until Chapter 6, and Chapter 6 drops the bomb of, oh yeah, by the way, all of your personalities aren't real. We wrote them. All of your character development, that wasn't you growing as a person. That was a script that you were following to a T. So it basically takes every character that had any shred of character development in V3 and makes it all meaningless.
Alright, I have more to say, and the reason why another reason why they made it worse is because after they dropped the twist, they could have just had, like, maybe another half hour of the trial.
No, yeah, this chapter is like the longest one in the series. It goes on for like 4 hours in the trial alone.
Of some anime bullshit, and that does happen, but they drag it out for another. This is after 2 hours. They drag it out for another 2 hours.
Yeah, the trial alone is like 4 hours, and it's like, that would be pushing it even if the chapter was fun. But it's not interesting. It's if anything, it's insulting, because it's like, my biggest problem by far.
You the bad guy.
Yeah. My biggest problem with V3-6, by far, is the fact that they try to pass it off as a pretentious message. Look, I know for a fact that there are eventually going to be people who see this video and think, oh, I liked V3-6. I thought it was not that bad. I actually liked the message of it. Here's my counter-argument to that. It's painfully clear that the only reason they did it in the first place is because the writers clearly wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know where to go. There are so many plot threads in not just V3, but like in the entire series that are not wrapped up. And before anyone says it, yes, I have watched the Danganronpa 3 anime, and yes, that does tie up a lot of loose ends from 1 and 2 and Ultra Despair Girls. However, my issue comes with the fact of them basically referencing the older series, I guess, the rest of the franchise, throughout V3, leading one to believe that it is not only canon, but directly connected. That's the first thing that's concerning. The second thing is that there are a ton of, like, plot threads throughout the original trilogy and spin-offs and this game that just kind of go unfinished. And 99% of it is because the game kind of just gives up and decide, you know what, none of it mattered. It's one of those insulting as hell things of, like, if you fucked up, if you wrote yourself into a corner, just admit it. Just admit we didn't know where we were going. And honestly, for as fourth wall breaky of a character that as Monokuma is, he probably could have said that and not felt out of place. He could have literally straight up said, yeah, we didn't know where we were going with this from the beginning, sorry. And it would have been plausible. But no, they try to pass it off as fighting back against the system, which, whatever kind of bullshit that is. And they try to say, oh, if none of it was real, our feelings still matter. Literally, no, they don't, because you just established that their personalities are fake. Like, you literally just said that.
Another thing that I hate about the message is, no shit, of course fiction can have an effect on reality. Why do you think I'm playing this game in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the other two left an effect on me.
It's an enjoyable series. That there's like, I know that the entire point of the message is all like, oh, people who are into this are fucked up. No, we're not into it because it's fucked up. We're into it because it's interesting. It's engaging. It's a very fascinating story to be told. The characters are very endearing. They're very memorable. It's not about, oh, we're just sick fucks who like to watch people die. No, we like to have our emotions affected because that's what good media does. It leaves an impression on you. And V3 tries to make you feel like the bad guy for enjoying that.
Another thing that I don't see people complain about this trial nearly as much as it deserves to be talked about.
Yeah.
This trial drags on for 4 hours, And yet, throughout the entire thing, half of the cast is completely abandoned.
Yeah, they really are.
Maki and Himiko, who the hell are they?
And it's especially disappointing in Maki's case, because in Chapter 5, she was one of the most interesting freaking characters in the game. Because her character development fucking skyrocketed in Chapter 5. You expected that to be some kind of motivation for her. You expect that to go somewhere, because rightfully it should. But no, she just kind of gets dropped. She kind of just exists. Himiko I can understand, because she's just, little girl doesn't really do anything to begin with. But Maki, it literally had like this massive character growth to the extent of Fuyuhiko in 2, and they just don't do anything with it.
I just find it unbelievable that one of the most important characters in the game gets maybe like 5 minutes of screen time in this 4-hour trial.
Yeah.
Instead all of it gets taken up by Shuichi, Kibo, and Samugi, all of which get progressively worse.
Okay, now here's something that I will kind of, and I know that people are gonna say like half of this video is literally just us bitching about V3-6, but like it needs to be bitched about. Hear us out. We will get to the others. But here's something that I think there are a few things, very, very small things, that V3-6 does right. One of them, and this is going to be very hit or miss depending on who you ask, but I kinda like the development of Kibo. Sort of. Huge asterisk there. But I do think it kinda makes him a little bit more interesting in the context of the rest of the game. How they use him in V3-6. That I don't like. But it does kinda tie him together throughout earlier portions of the game. And especially compared to things that like Gonta has been hinting at since the beginning, like the little camera bugs, that I feel like Kibo kind of ties into that because of the development he gets in this chapter. And it is a little bit interesting. I do really like one really nice touch, and I haven't heard anybody say that this is a bad thing. I've heard people complain about Kibo, but not about this. The hair thing being knocked off and him going apeshit. It kind of gives his character more uniqueness. It makes him feel less robotic, forgive my robophobia. But like,
by the way, I really don't like Kibo because he's just a cardboard cutout of a protagonist combined with the robophobia gag, which was funny maybe one time.
Yeah. I can see that argument. I personally don't really care. Like, I don't feel strongly about Kibo one way or the other, but I do definitely think that him losing that antenna thing on his hair and letting us see basically the real him beneath that, I think that does make him more interesting as a character. It makes him feel more developed. Another thing, and this is not a point in V3-6's favor at all. It's more kind of just a point in the favor of the game as a whole. I do like how they brought the voice actors from the other games back. That was a nice touch.
Yeah,
the reason they did so is stupid, but the fact that they were able to organize that and actually went through and did it is pretty cool.
Also, it did have quite possibly my favorite moment in the entire series, was when it was over and I didn't have to play it anymore. That was awesome.
Yeah, cause I think I actually like went to bed at some point during him playing this. It went on till like 3 in the morning. You started this chapter at like 9 p.m. and finished it like way into the night, and after a while I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to bed. I'll see you bitch about it as much as I did in the morning. And I woke up and I just saw I saw like this long line of messages that were something along the lines of, no, No, please stop. Make it end. Please, for the love of God. It's still going. Why? Just end already. And this went on for like 3 pages.
Sorry about that.
No, dude, it was funny. Like, it's an accurate representation of how this chapter made me feel. Like, it really is.
Okay. I think we're done talking. Are we done talking about that?
Okay, that's about all I have in me for right now.
Move on to some incredibly drastic increase in quality,
But still mixed. I should clarify that. Still mixed.
I mean, all right. There's a few more cases that I actively dislike, but not nearly as much as that.
All right. So
let's start with
what I think is the worst aside from V36.
Okay, which one is that?
I would vote it's 2-6.
Okay.
And the reason that I say this is
I basically have that in my D tier.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in F. And the reason that I put it in F is because while on its own, I honestly don't think it's that bad of a chapter. The trial is interesting. The build up to the trial is actually fantastic. Like I really like the kind of scramble across the islands to get this information. I really like the hidden room door code. The investigation in the Old Hope's Peak was awesome. That was a really nice throwback.
Getting to see Chihiro again.
Yeah. The revelation of the grown-up Hiyoko, that threw me for a loop when I first saw it. But where this chapter...
Okay. You can talk.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Where this chapter falls apart is in the fact that... Okay. The reason that V36 is so bad, primarily, there's a lot of reasons, but primarily, it's because it kind of retcons the entire franchise out of existence. V36, or 2.6 does the same thing, but on a much smaller scale. It retcons not the lore of 2, but the events of 2. Everything that happens from the point you start the game to the point where you end it, it is kind of written out of existence. The things you learn in the process of that are still canon, but the actual happenings of what you see occur in-game are retconned. It never happened. And I feel like that kind of brings down 2 as a whole.
Okay, I didn't really have that effect on me. What bothers me is that there's a lot of... You know how I was talking about, like, the anime bullshit and how I was just expecting it to be some of that in V36?
Yeah.
They go overboard with it in 2.6.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They really do.
There is so much of it.
Giantess fans, you're welcome.
Also, Hajime literally goes Super Saiyan.
Yeah. But, let me ask you this, actually.
Words while screaming future, and that apparently is supposed to solve all of our problems. I don't know how that works.
I have a question for you, actually. As of the time of recording this, have you watched the Danganronpa 3 anime?
I have not.
Okay, because I think you should watch that. It actually gives a lot of insight on Hajime specifically. So definitely watch. If that's a problem you have with 2, don't worry. V3 explains a lot of it. Or 3, rather.
Okay, I do know that they go deeper into the whole Izuru thing.
Yeah.
Which is great, because from what I saw of him in V3's post-game and in 2, I don't really like... It's kind of interesting how he's so good at everything that he's just bored with life.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, that's his entire personality.
There's a reason for that, and like half of the 3 anime is basically an origin story of that. So watch that if you want to get a better idea of why that is. Yeah. There is a reason.
Also, the Remnants of Despair twist, that was... I like how they really run with the implications of that. But on the other hand, some of the shit that they make up for that twist flat out makes no sense.
Go into detail here, because I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've played 1 and 2, so just keep that in mind.
Okay. If you remember the way Junko was executed in DR1, she got crushed. She got crushed flatter than a pancake.
Oh yeah, that. Because didn't they say, like, they tried to, like, stitch her body back together or some bullshit like that?
They tried to, like, take out one of her eyes and implant it into their own sockets.
Yeah.
There are no eyes.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. It's
she
just
was
a pile of blood and...
Yeah, she was, like, disintegrated in the end of 1.
And then... But yeah, that's... It does get a lot of... It does get a few things right, but it also gets quite a few things wrong, and that's why
it's basically just V3-6, but less bad.
Yeah. That is...
It's still bad, but it's significantly less bad.
Yeah, I'd still put it in, like, the bottom half.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd put it in my bottom 5.
The reason that I
dishonorable mention.
The reason that I put it in F primarily is because of what it means for the rest of 2. It basically means that all the events of the games didn't matter, and that's one of my biggest. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in any written media. Earlier I brought up the comparison to Wizard of Oz and how it was all a dream thing kind of works in the movie's favor. A lot of that is because Dorothy as a character develops throughout the course of the film, and this translates onto her personality when she wakes up at the end. It's a character dynamic that works because the things that happened in the dream weren't meaningless. And Danganronpa 2 doesn't really do that. It just kind of says, yeah, chapters 1 through 5, don't worry about it. The stuff that you learned in the process, that's all good. But everything that you did, everything that you saw, none of that was real. And I don't like how that doesn't really have any kind of implications later on in the series.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up the Wizard of Oz again, because it's a perfect segue into the next thing I want to talk about.
Yes. 2, 3. All right, so yes. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm torn between D and F here.
I put it in F.
Let me hear your reasoning here.
All right. Mainly, it has probably the worst case of double murder syndrome I've ever seen. They talk about Hiyoko's death for maybe 10 minutes in the trial. They don't even figure out the murder weapon. They just said her throat was slit and no weapon ever gets found. They don't even talk about it.
I didn't even think about that until you just said it, but you're right. And I don't like that.
And there's Ibuki, who... Her death is the one that's talked about the most, but it never gets explained why she specifically had to get killed. That is not talked about.
Yeah, that's also a good point. Another thing... and you know what? I think I agree with you, now that I'm more thinking about it. Because now that that's on my mind, now that you pointed that out to me, that murder weapon thing with Yoko, that bothers me. I don't like that. Another thing is that there's no blood anywhere. Her throat was slit, you'd think that would leave a goddamn mess. But it don't.
Blood, there just wasn't a lot of it.
Okay, but you're slitting someone's throat. That's gonna spew. That's not gonna leak. That's going to spew. That's gonna make a mess.
I don't know the mechanics of slitting someone's throat because I've never done it before.
Neither have I, but I've played enough video games to understand how blood splatter works with anatomy. If you slit someone's throat, that's not just gonna... That's gonna freaking sprinkler the room.
Okay, and then there's the way Mikan reportedly managed to make her way through the body discovery sequence. I did like the body discovery sequence, but the way it happened is impossible.
Yeah, Mikana's not that fast. Nowhere near.
She had to get to the music venue far enough after Hajime left.
We should
so
also keep in mind that this isn't like Danganronpa 1 and 3 where this is in one building. She basically had to walk like probably a collective 3 or 4 miles in the span of like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and she had to run through on this island that is very rocky and sandy.
And also not get seen during any of it. In the middle of the day.
We're talking about.
Yeah.
She would not be able to do that.
Yeah.
She had to run all the way to the music venue, smash some electronics, snap a drumstick in front of the door, take off the wallpaper to reveal Hyoko's body, glue the fucking door shut.
That's another thing I want to bring up, actually. How the hell did that glue dry that solid, that fast?
Yeah, that is not how glue works.
Because, like, okay, look, I get that super glue dries fast, but you still have to let it solidify. If you put that in the crack of a door, it will open. If you just push the door, especially with 3 people trying to budget. Glue does not harden that much that fast. I don't care what kind of Gorilla Glue you're using, that doesn't work.
And then she somehow managed to run all the way to the motel and meet up with Hajime and Chiaki after they left the motel, and the meeting could have only lasted like 2 minutes tops.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, the biggest problem with 2-3 is that it's just implausible. It's just, none of this could have reasonably happened in the time window that we're expected to believe that it happened.
Also, the motive is one of the most half-assed things I've seen. They did foreshadow the finale with it, but it just still seems lazy and half-assed.
I do feel like it's not that they wrote themselves into a corner, really, because I don't think that this was something they came up with on the spot. I do think they planned this, but part of it does kind of feel like Mikan's character just doesn't feel like it's heading in that direction. You definitely know it's going somewhere, but you don't think it's going there.
Also, on a smaller note, the voice acting in the trial, I don't like it.
Yeah, I can see that.
I do not
it doesn't really bother me all that much, but I can see why you would say that. Mikan's voice change, halfway through the end of the chapter, it does not sound like her, and I don't like that. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about 2-3. Is there anything else you have to say here?
I mean, there is the obvious positive to talk about, being Fuyuhiko.
Okay, yeah, yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. But
probably one of the most well-written characters in the series.
He's one of the most well-written characters I've ever seen in a game. Like, he has some of the best character development I think I've ever seen. Which brings me nicely to 2-2. I kind of want to put this in S. I'm sorry, but it's got to be at least A or S.
Okay, I would not put it anywhere near that high.
Really? Really? I would, and here's why. I really like the game backstory thing. That is such a neat idea, and it's so, like, it's well contained enough to, like, you know right from the beginning of starting this that this is something that happened to somebody in the cast. But they do a really good job of hiding who was who. They do a really good job at that. And it keeps the suspense throughout the trial really, really good. You know there's connections between these characters. You know there's links to them. You know that each one of these characters in the game is meant to represent the real characters, but they don't spell it out for you. They make you figure it out. And I really like how clever that is. They actually leave the logic up to the player for once, and it's really well done.
Okay. What? I liked the idea of Twilight Syndrome. I thought it was a good idea. The execution was not at all what I was hoping for.
How so?
Okay. Here's the thing. The murder itself, it's the kind of thing you would see in a first trial. Peko just clonks her on the head with a baseball bat and jumps out a window. And that's it.
Okay, yeah, I kind of see where you're coming from there.
And they pad out the trial with Twilight Syndrome, and you get forced to figure out all the little things about the game, except for the most pressing one, which is who the fuck is Sato.
Yeah.
You don't even touch on that.
By the way, I
know they do that.
They
in
do
DR3.
that in they do it in 3.
I know they do touch on that in DR3.
They don't just touch on it; they go really in depth with it.
All right, yeah, but on the other hand, I shouldn't have to consult an entirely different genre of media just to get a complete story. I
agree with that wholeheartedly.
And they pad it out a lot with the game, and most of it amounts to nothing. The whole
in the same vein as what you're saying, and now that I think about this, I think I want to knock it down to B. I think that's where I'm going to put it. And the reason is because, yes, I agree, it's very heavily padded. While the suspense is great, the logic is fantastic, the concept is really good. I don't like how they kind of invent a lot of plot threads for no reason.
Yeah, they come up with all these plot threads and don't really do anything with them.
The serial killer thing was stupid.
Yeah, Sparkling Justice, they just threw in an extra half hour for the sake of throwing in an extra half hour.
Yeah, look, I get why they did that. I understand why they did that. It was to demonstrate the point of that was to demonstrate that Peko feels like she has to take the fall. That was the reason for it.
Yes.
But they could have done that with like 2 lines of dialogue. There was no need to pad it out that much.
Yeah. That's the main thing I don't like. It's all the padding and all the things that just don't really go anywhere. And the murder that's just really simple. It's kind of... I would like it a lot more if Twilight Syndrome wasn't there.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because the murder itself is kind of fun to figure out. And seeing the backstory with Fuyuhiko and Peko, that was great, and it made for one of the most emotional endings to a trial in the series.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, but I will argue that I do think that Twilight Syndrome helps it, mostly just because I really like the character links between the 3 of them. Between Fuyuhiko, Peko, and Mahiru. And I feel like that just wouldn't have been as impactful if you didn't have to figure it out. I think if they had just told you, she killed my sister, it wouldn't have meant as much.
I mean, they make it abundantly clear from the beginning. They make it abundantly clear who each of the characters are. Like, you start off playing as Girl A, and she immediately walks into a social situation, and she's like,
yeah.
That's what Mikon sounds like, by the way. Am I a good voice actor?
You know, every time you say things like this, you're kind of, like, you're making very good points, and because of that, despite how much I like it, I think I'm gonna put it in the middle of the road. C seems about fair.
Alright, I have it in D. It's just too heavily padded.
It's too heavily padded. There are a lot of writing issues, but what it does right, it does really well.
Yeah,
the character writing in Chapter 2 of Danganronpa 2 is some of the best in the entire series. Like, by far. It's super good.
And also, as one of the few people who is a fan of Mahiru, I'm really glad that they decided to lay on the emotional value of her death especially thick.
Yeah. I really do like the character.
One of the few times where Ibuki gets to be important.
Yeah. The character dynamics in this chapter are fantastic. It's just like, all of the problems are in the execution of it. It's just in how they handled it. But how this chapter is written is pretty damn good.
There's just one more thing I have to complain about, and that's that a few of the characters don't really appear in the chapter at all.
Yeah.
Like, they don't even say that much. Kazuichi and Nekomaru, and...
to be fair, that's kind of an issue with Danganronpa 2 in general, and V3 to an extent.
Well, there's one trial in particular that doesn't do that, and I'm very excited to talk about that one.
I know exactly which one you're talking about, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yep. Are we done? Are we done?
Is that the last thing you wanted to say about that one?
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
All right. In that case, I think we'll move on. So, what do we discuss next? We haven't talked about Danganronpa 1 yet. I think we should do that.
We have not. That is your favorite.
My favorite, and this is going to be heavily biased. Extremely biased, in fact. But, goddamn, Chapter 2.
Honestly, I have it in S tier.
I think so do I. I'm kind of teetering between A and S because there are a couple of things about it that aren't too great. But overall, it's pretty fantastic.
I'm gonna say this right now. I have a very clear top 4 cases from the series. I have the one that we both mutually agree is the best at the top.
Yeah.
Then I have the best one from V3 and the one from 2 that we don't fully agree on. And then there's
some things.
1, 2.
1, 2 is... Okay, let me explain this, actually.
It's the biggest enigma out of them because I know I want to put it in there somewhere, but I don't know where.
Here's the thing about Chapter 2 for me, and this is a very personal thing. This is why I said I was very biased towards it. Chihiro is probably my favorite character in the series. I really like how he's written. He is extremely believable, and to someone like me, I am, for context, I'm a very effeminate man. Not quite to the extent that Chihiro is, but I'm not what you would call a manly guy. Not in the traditional sense, at least. I'm kind of a pacifist. I don't like seeing people fight. I like to diffuse situations as quickly as possible. I don't like arguing. I can be a little bit sensitive sometimes. And honestly, I've always felt very feminine in that sense. I'm very passive. And Chihiro is that, but to an extreme, to the point where it would be considered like a disorder, basically. And because of that, it's actually very relatable to me. And it's not only relatable, it's inspiring. Because the whole reason that he got killed is because he was growing as a character. He was developing. He was making something of himself. And that's really heartwarming. Like, really heartwarming. Chihiro's story is one of the most touching of any character in the series.
I do also love how this case handles the characters. It probably does the best job of that out of any case, maybe, in the series.
It's up there. I don't know if it would be the best, but it's definitely up there.
And there's also the way it handles 2 other characters in particular. I know you don't like Toko, but honestly,
okay, look, you have to understand that the reason I don't like Toko is because of Ultra Despair Girls. I don't like her in the first game, but I can tolerate her. She's not as bad in Danganronpa 1 as she is later.
But the way Genocide Jill gets revealed, I really love that reveal. Not because you don't see it coming, but because Genocide Jill is great.
I agree. Another thing, and this is just kind of a brief thing I wanted to touch on, but we mentioned in a couple of earlier discussions that, like, oh, we really don't like how this was padded out. The Genocide Jill thing was paced perfectly. They did not beat around the bush. They didn't try to waste your time with, oh, who could it be? Byakuya just says it. He's just like, yeah, it's Toko. Genocide Jill is one of us. It's Toko. He just points at her, and they don't waste time letting the player figure it out. They know it's painfully obvious, so they just get on with it, and I really like that.
They just give you one Hangman's Gambit, and it's not Danganronpa 2, so it doesn't take 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's very well paced. It's quick. It's to the point. They don't waste your time with it. It's a very obvious reveal, and they keep it that way, which I like. They don't try to force it to be something it's not.
And then there's the reveal that you already talked about, like the big one about Chihiro actually being a guy. I think it was handled pretty well, but there's also
okay. Let me say this. Let me say this, and I know for a fact that people are going to agree with me on this because I've seen discussions about it. It is not plausible for people to just switch to calling him the he on the drop of a dime. That it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. When you figure out that somebody, and people are going to say in the comments, I know for a fact, Chihiro's not trans. I know he's not trans, but this happens in the real world to trans people. When they come out as trans and say what gender they identify with, it takes people a little while to adapt. It's not an instant thing. It's a habit. People, it's not a matter of disrespecting someone and what they identify as. It's not a matter of not wanting to respect who they want to be. It's a matter of just human error. People are used to calling someone he or she for so long, it becomes second nature. It's just,
I have experience with that myself.
It's an honest mistake that people make all the time, and nobody makes that mistake. Like, they all just change immediately, and none of them ever stutter or trip up or say the wrong word. No, none of that. At all. And it's kind of hard to believe that they would just... Not that they wouldn't accept it so quick, but they would be able to adapt to it, like, instantly.
That's like the one complaint I have about the chapter, but it more than gets made up for by Genocide Jill, Chihiro, and also... the bromance between Taka and Mondo.
Yes, that's one of my favorite moments in the series, mostly because it's never explained.
I think the lack of explanation is all the explanation you need.
I know, and that's why I love it. It's just like, they're at each other's throats, and Makoto's just like, fuck this, I'm tired. Wake up the next morning, and they're like dating or some shit, and everyone's just like, what the hell did you two do in there? And they never answer.
Hima even says it sounds like sexual harassment.
Yeah, he outright like goes there with it, and they just never acknowledge it. It's great.
It's also because after you start outing Mondo as the killer, Taka's reaction to this is great. I love it.
It's very, very believable. He's so obsessed with Mondo that he's just like, he doesn't want to accept that this is true. And
I love that it's
very, very believable, especially as someone who, like, just recently, like the day before, became like best buds with Mondo. That's how infatuation works. It's quick, it builds up very fast, and it fades over time. Something like this happening the next day, it would break him, and it does break him, and it's very believable the way he reacts.
I think it's one of the only times in the series where someone actually votes for the wrong person, and Monokuma brings it up.
Yeah. They said it was Taka, right?
Yeah, it was him. He didn't vote for Mondo because he refused to believe that he could do wrong.
It's a very believable character arc.
And I also love Mondo's motive because it wasn't even really a motive. He just sort of flew into a fit of rage because Chihiro said something that set him off, and then he actually regrets doing what he did.
Yes, I was about to say that. What knocks this from A tier, because the gender thing does kind of, like, doesn't ruin it, but it's kind of off-putting because of how unnatural it feels. That's kind of what was pushing it down to A, but I think what knocks it up to S is the fact that Mondo is, as far as I remember, the only character in the entire series who said that if they had a second chance, they would take it back. He's the only character in the series who... There have been other characters that regretted their murders. There have been. A great example of that is Kaede. She regrets it, but she still follows through with it, and she sticks to that till the end. Mondo is the only character who said, if I had a second chance to go back and do this again, I wouldn't do it. I would take it back. If I could undo what I did, I would. He's the only character that does that.
That's what made him one of my favorite characters from 1.
I agree.
Is just that moment at the end.
He's a very... You would expect a character like that to be, like, stereotypical macho asshole, like, you don't fuck with me, I'll beat the shit out of you, but no, he's a very respectful guy. And that really comes across.
It takes until V3 for them to make a character who swears a lot and is also not sympathetic.
Alright, so I think that just about covers why 1-2 is fantastic, so what do you say we move on?
I want to talk about 1-3.
Okay. Where do you think we should put this? I'm thinking... I have
it in D.
I was gonna put it in either C or D. I'm still teetering on C, but let me hear you out.
There are some things about the chapter that I really like, but none of it is really in the part of the thing that we're talking about. I like Alter Ego, and I like how Taka is sort of flown into a depressive state, and he can't really... And he's sort of just becomes speechless and doesn't talk at all.
Here's my counter-argument to that. While, yes, I wholeheartedly agree that those parts of the chapter are phenomenal, I definitely think they're not as relevant to the chapter overall. That's more of a lingeration of Chapter 2. It feels like it feels like an epilogue to Chapter 2 rather than something... Because it's almost completely unrelated to everything else.
I do agree with that. And then another thing that happens is the way that Taka recovers. I don't like it.
I think it's a little bit unnaturally fast.
It's unnaturally fast the way that Alter Ego sort of simulates Mondo's personality to try and be motivational to him, and then he goes Super Saiyan and his character becomes a lot less likable.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then there's the murders themselves, and while I do like the attempt to be this convoluted murder where you don't really know what's happening, the killer is way too obvious for it to work well.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And, okay, one thing I will absolutely give to this chapter is credit, and I think this is one of the reasons that I want to put it in C, not D. The body discovery scene is frantic as hell. It is very hyperactive. There's a lot going on, there's a lot to take in a very short amount of time, and it's very frantic.
I did like that part, but as soon as it ends and you start trying to piece together what happens, you just remember that scene and you're like, Celeste was the only person who ever saw Robo Justice and is also currently alive.
Hero
just says a bunch of shit that leads us in a bunch of different directions, and then 2 people just die.
Okay, so I agree with you, and I'm putting it in D, and here's why. Because you're right. You're absolutely right. And the reason that knocks it down is because it kind of makes Celeste's plan make not a lot of sense. Because here's the thing. Her motive is the weakest in the series. I'm gonna outright say that. Her motive is the least relatable in the entire series. She literally killed for money.
And also, when the motive is presented, it kind of becomes clear that if anyone's going to murder for money, it's
gonna be the gambler.
If anyone's gonna do that, it's gonna be her. And she gets a lot less likable, despite I do like her breakdown in the trial. That
Yes,
was fun.
I agree. I agree with that. Celeste is a very fun character to watch, but she's not a fun character to analyze because as soon as you start thinking about everything she does, the less sense it makes. And I feel like that's kind of what is Chapter 3's undoing. It's the fact that Celeste is she's a very interesting character because of, like, the mystery and, like, she's shrouded in mystery. You don't know what this character is. You don't know what her real name is for basically the entire time you know her. You don't know where she came from. You don't know what she's all about. Her ultimate talent is incredibly vague. The way she lives is incredibly vague. You don't know a lot about her, and that's kind of what makes her so fascinating. As soon as you start to try to figure out why all of those things are, and you find out the reasons for them, they're just not that interesting. It's very bland. She's just high society type. That's really all there is to it. There's no like dark past or a reason why she is the way she is. She just likes money, and that's it. They don't do anything with that. They have a lot of opportunities to make Celeste an interesting character, and the way that they build up suspense for her is very good, but the payoff of that suspense is just not worth it.
Kind of sums up the series as a whole.
Yeah, but, like, my point still stands. Like, she's a very interesting character because she's so unpredictable. And as soon as in Chapter 3, she becomes predictable. That's the issue. They took a very, very unpredictable and very mysterious character and made her a lot less mysterious and a lot more predictable.
Okay. Are we done talking about this?
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I put it in D.